We need to strengthen Americans' confidence in our elections. And I think there's some real common sense reforms that can be done to make sure Americans have that confidence in our elections. Secretary Luce Oliver, you referenced how do we increase that? Would photo ID increase Americans' confidence in their elections? Yes or no?
Mr. Ranking Member, I don't believe so.
You don't believe that having an individual show their photo ID, saying they are who they say they are, increases confidence in our elections?
Mr. Chairman, you asked me a yes or no question. I don't think that's a magic bullet.
I'm not asking if it's a magic. Well, I'll come to you, Secretary LaRose. Do you think photo ID increases Americans' confidence in our elections?
100%, Mr. Chairman, and it's vastly popular among both Republicans and Democrats.
It makes total sense, right? That 100%. You should go in and show your photo ID. If you board an airplane, you got to show your photo ID. You want to buy a six-pack of beer, you got to show a photo ID. If you go in to vote, it makes total sense that you should have to show your photo ID just to simply say you are who you say you are, right?
Absolutely.
Makes total sense. And as we think about other states, I know New Mexico doesn't have a photo ID law. Something maybe the state of New Mexico should look at is, per your comment, we're all working together to increase Americans' confidence in our elections. There's some real common sense reforms we would like to see made in states like New Mexico that doesn't have a photo ID law. Mr. LaRose, you removed 500 non-citizens from the voting rolls. In reading your remarks and in conversations with you, you went through, took your state motor vehicle database, you cross-referenced that from the DHS SAVE database, and we're able to determine that there were 500 non-citizens on your voter rolls. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, Mr. Chairman.
And so as we look to other states, Mr. Fontes, you said you removed a number of ineligible voters. Ms. Benson, you referenced that you removed, I think, 800,000 ineligible voters over the course of the past 5 years. Did you do the same work that Mr. LaRose did, where you checked your vehicle database and cross-referenced the DHS SAVE database? I'll start with you, Secretary Benson.
Thank you. We actually do a number of things to ensure and review the eligibility of our citizens. And we do a number of audits, actually. We use the SAVE system when people are actually registering and getting their license, but we can't use it to actually go back and look at people who are already registered because of the way that the system is set up. But what we do.
Would you utilize it if we set it up and gave
May I
access?
respond to the auditing we are already doing, which is, it makes that unnecessary. We actually go back and every single person.
How do you confirm whether or not an individual is a citizen without doing a back check to the SAVE database?
Everyone who goes into our system when they get a license or ID has to show some sort of documentation. In that documentation, their citizenship is essentially verified. It's
essentially verified, but why not check it against the SAVE database?
We do at that time.
But you don't retroactively do it in review.
We are unable to do it retroactively based on the database.
So So in my legislation, we actually give states back the access to be able to utilize that. Mr. LaRose, you were able to do that. How were you able to do that?
We're able to do that based on the agreement that we've reached with DHS to use the SAVE database. But there's a hole in using motor vehicle data exclusively because there are some people that don't get a motor vehicle operator's license or don't get a state ID. And that's where we're able to fill that hole by also querying the SAVE database, which is foolishly, they charge us $1 or something a query to do that.
I'll note our legislation and in the SAVE Act gives states free access to the database. And per Mr. Secretary Fontes' comment with funding, what we're working on is making sure that states have that access unimpeded by cost and giving states access to the U.S. information as to whether or not an individual is a citizen. I'd encourage all of you to continue to work with the federal government to get access as Secretary LaRose did. And I'd encourage the House and the Senate to pass and ultimately be signed into law the SAVE Act, which would give states full access into that database. I want to shift gears briefly, if I can, to you, Secretary Benson. President Biden put forward Executive Order 14019. It was referenced earlier, directing agencies to create strategic plans relating to voting. It's been criticized for directing federal taxpayer dollars to what many consider partisan get-out-the-vote efforts. Are you aware that each executive branch agency, including the Small Business Administration, was asked to produce a strategic plan under the executive order?
Yeah.
And are you aware the SBA has been subpoenaed twice to provide their strategic plan?
Yeah.
And have you seen the Small Business Administration strategic plan?
I've seen the MOU between the SBA and our office.
Right. So you and your state conducted an MOU with the Small Business Administration. Did you see the Small Business Administration's strategic plan?
We did one thing.
Did you see the strategic plan? Have you reviewed it? Have you read it? Did you provide input into it?
We provided, under the boundaries of the MOU, a URL to the SBA so that they could register voters through their website.
But did you provide input into the Small Business Administration's strategic
No.
plan? Have you seen the Small Business Administration's strategic
under
plan?
the
Have you seen the Small Business
I've said
Administration's
no.
strategic plan?
I've said under the context.
So you've not seen the strategic
I'm really
plan.
not sure why you're barraging me with these questions. We provided the SBA with a
Secretary
URL
Benson,
so that they could register
I'm
voters
asking
through their
specific
website.
questions.
That's it.
Let me give you a background as to why I'm asking you this question. It's actually
No,
actually
I've
worthy
just
of it.
answered your question.
That's great. The reason you asked why I'm asking you, so I'm going to answer your question to me. The reason I'm asking you is the Small Business Administration, under Executive Order 14019, put forward a strategic plan and entered into an MOU and a contract with the state of Michigan. Has any other Secretary of State here entered into a contract with the Small Business Administration?
No.
None. So the record will reflect only Michigan. So it's quite interesting. The Small Business Administration entered into an MOU with the state of Michigan, and they're doing that under the direction and under the strategy of a strategic plan. They have put forward a strategic plan, and all agencies have done this. And we have subpoenaed to get the strategic plan from every single federal agency. These agencies are using our taxpayer dollars to put forward a partisan get out the vote effort. And they won't provide the strategic plan. This administration, the Biden administration, continues to hide the strategic plan from every taxpayer in this country. And I think that does not encourage people to have more confidence in their elections. This administration should show the American people what is in the strategic plan they have put forward. They have uniquely contracted only with the state of Michigan from the Small Business Administration. We've seen the Department of Education engage in using taxpayer dollars for work study. We've seen other federal agencies engage in our elections. And what we are asking is to be able to see this strategic plan as drafted by every federal agency. You haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. I believe the American people deserve to see the strategic plans as drafted by this administration as to what they are doing as it relates to this upcoming election.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for coming today. I have to say I'm sorry if people have threatened individuals. We get threats. Our threats are up 300, 400%. And so it's sadly enough the world we live in, and I blame social media primarily for it, for all of us. Ms. Toulouse-Oliver, you made a statement that kind of bothered me a little bit. You said frivolous FOIA requests. That's the whole purpose of transparent government. We've had FOIA requests that go out to the FBI, to some of these other institutions that never get returned. That's the whole purpose of transparent government. And I believe this is really the basis of where the voter angst and anger is coming from, because we are not seeing a transparent government. You look at the SBA, and I'll ask Ms. Benson really at this point in time, you want every eligible voter to do something. You're aware that the VA by executive order is enrolling people, correct, in your state?
We meet people where they are, and if they're veterans or service members, I welcome every opportunity.
And are you aware that the
register them
two
to vote.
places in
Yeah.
the VAs in the state of Michigan are both in Democratic districts? No Republican
No,
districts
it's actually, that's not
whatsoever.
accurate. That's
No,
not
well,
accurate.
that was accurate yesterday in our VA meeting.
No,
So this is where
it's a website, so it is available to everybody.
This
It's
is
a
where the
URL on
angst
a
comes
website.
from, because it is due for thee, as we tell you to do. And this is where the chairman was talking about, yeah, we are doing voter registration, but it is only for Democrats. It is not across the board. And this is where the angst and the anger comes from, because this administration has said, oh yeah, we're doing transparent things, but we're not doing transparent things. It is absolutely for Democrats. It is absolutely to try to change elections. And when I got through 2020, I'm a surgeon. I am very objective. Cancer doesn't know Republican or Democrat. I look at things absolutely objective. Why the hell are deceased people still on your voter rolls? And why does it take a lawsuit by the Public Interest Legal Foundation to sue you to get those people off the voter rolls? Tell me.
Which one of those three questions did you want me to answer first?
Please endure me.
Okay, so I'll take the last first. That lawsuit was dismissed because we actually are ranked 4th in the country, as the federal judge noticed. At the
So
top,
do you
5th in the
have
country.
deceased people on your voter rolls? Yes or no?
We vigorously.
Yes or no?
If we do everything we can, and just like every other state to remove
Should a
it, we
deceased
actually
person be on your voter roll?
no, and that's why we remove
Great.
them once
Should
we
an illegal
receive
person who is in this
information.
country illegally vote in any election?
No,
Okay. What if somebody is unknowingly registered to vote in an election? They're illegal in this country. Should their vote be counted?
no.
Okay, great. I would love to hear that and love everybody to embrace that.
We do.
That's great. You know, guys, why would you not, Ms. Two-House Oliver, why would you not embrace voter ID?
We do have voter ID in New Mexico. We just have a variety of different ways that voters can confirm their identity.
Yeah, so this is where, you know, the folks in Georgia screamed about voter ID. Voter ID is going to suppress the vote, when they had the greatest turnout in history. You know, this is, if you don't want voter ID, why would the reason for not? It's BS to think it is suppressing the vote. BS. BS. And the only other reason that people would want that is so that people could vote who are not eligible to vote. And so this is where the angst comes from. It comes from lack of transparency. It comes from smugness. It comes from the fact this administration is doing everything it can to push one particular narrative into a one-party state. And, you know, I say that objectively, after looking things objectively and trying to scrub the data, scrub what's going on, and it is absolutely horrible that we're doing this here in the United States. And we didn't find out that about years ago because it wasn't being done. And whoever has been running the White House for the last 3.5 years has been pushing a narrative to try to get one-party rule, period. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you for being here. I appreciate the work that you guys do. Look, whether we like it or not, election integrity is a huge issue, bipartisan issue in this country, whether it's perception or reality. People have to have confidence in their elections. And the questioning of elections is on both sides of the aisle. It's not just one side of the aisle. In 2018, Georgia's gubernatorial election, Stacey Abrams refused to acknowledge her defeat by Brian Kemp, citing integrity of the Georgia election. So we see it on both sides. This is an issue that has to be addressed, and at least in Georgia, the largest concern is over mail-in ballots. Through studies over years and years, when there is fraud, and there is fraud in every election. I mean, we have to acknowledge that. It's an issue that's in our country. It's in every state. It's minimizing that fraud as best as we can to make sure that it doesn't affect the outcome of the election. And then we have to do it in such a way that it gives the populace confidence that we are at least trying our best to have an election that's full of integrity. So with that, Secretary Fontes, just to simplify things, I'll just address questions to you. In Arizona, like Arizona, many voters choose to vote by mail. Can you tell the committee what protections Arizona has in place to ensure mail-in ballots are actually going to voters at their correct mailing address, and that the signatures on the ballots match the signature Arizona has on file for each voter?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Loudermilk, first and foremost, I have to take umbrage with the notion that the conclusory statement that you made there is fraud in every election. That's just not true. It's never been proven.
You can.
So I'll start
let me
As
ask
for the
you,
address
you can
verification
verify.
circumstance.
This is my time. You can verify to this committee that there is no fraud in any Arizona election. 100%.
It's an entirely different question than stating that there is fraud in every election. It's a very different.
Okay.
That's exactly what you said, sir.
I
But to
did
answer
say
your
that.
question,
I just don't see the difference is if I say
if you'd like me to answer
sir,
your question.
the time belongs to me.
Yes, sir.
We can have an interaction, but you have to allow me to continue on with something you brought up. I don't see how there's a difference by saying that there is fraud in every election, and then you can't guarantee that you've never had an election without fraud. But this is, I think we have to be intellectually honest going forward, right? we deal with a constituency where not everyone abides by a common moral code, that we respect the rights of each other and we follow the rule of law. There are cheaters out there in every state. We can't fix the problem unless we're intellectually honest. So with that, if you could please now address the issue of how do you ensure mail-in ballots are actually going to voters at their correct mailing address, and how do you ensure that the signatures match those that you have on file?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Loudermilk, as to the address verification system that we employ in Arizona, which has been in place for a very, very long time, continuously updated. We use the National Change of Address database by the United States Postal Service. We use a first and second notice system to our county registrars, which will send a second piece of mail if we have returned election mail. And that second piece of mail is a second notice to the registrar. That back and forth communication via election mail, which is a little different than first class mail, it cannot be forwarded, by the way. So those are some of the techniques that we use, among others. But I would like to touch on the signature verification system that, again, we've been using for a very long time in Arizona, a couple of decades, as a matter of fact, that uses 3 layers of human eyeballs on these signatures. And these folks, by the way, I would argue are better than the signature checking folks in some law enforcement agencies, because they don't just do ballots on election day. As I indicated in my opening, we've already had 4 elections in Arizona. Guess what? Over 80% of our ballots on average now are by mail. And that means every single one of those ballots has to be signature verified. These are the same people trained by the trainers who train the FBI in their signature verification
Let me
process.
follow up on that. Are the signatures verified against the signature on the application or on the registration?
They are, well, that is essentially one and the same. And we keep a lot of those signatures in place to have a total voter record. And we will hopefully be able to, although there's been efforts against this, utilize the entire record of a voter's signature, because it changes. It adjusts over time. We get a little older. Sometimes you have something like Parkinson's or a physical injury that gets in the way. And because that does happen, if we have a mismatched signature, we make every effort to contact those voters either by phone or email, or even employ some of the political parties to go chase down ballots where there are mismatches before the end of the cure period.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the ranking member for bringing us together today. Ms. Benson, I want to start out by saying